patience here. We're ready to go. I'll call the meeting, a regular meeting of council, to order. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda pertains to bylaws 4231 and 4232. These are the addresses at 2601 Spuraway Avenue, 1160 Lansdowne Drive, and 1636 Regan Avenue. The staff recommendation is that council give second and third readings to zoning amendment bylaw number 4231 and fourth and final reading to housing agreement bylaw 4232.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 pertains to bylaw 4212. This is an address at 2810 Glen Drive, and the staff recommendations give second and third readings to Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4212.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is bylaw 4225. This is for 527 Poirier Street and 1714 Haversley Avenue. Staff recommendation is to give second and third readings to Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4225 and fourth and final reading to Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4225.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Lynch, that we decline. The motion is to decline. The speaking order begins with Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. Normally, I would be voting for something like this. I think that these are good use of densifying in our core. However, when we get a situation like this, where a whole street comes out and is against something like this, they have a petition signed by everybody on the street, and we didn't have anybody present in favor. So I think I've heard loud and clear from the residents on that street that they didn't want it, so I'll be supporting your motion to decline.
Thank you. Councillor Reid, the Chair of Land Use Committee.
Thank you. I will be voting to decline this application as well. Poirier Street is becoming a very interesting street for us. We have a very big sports precinct in the middle of it. I know that the high school is redoing their site as well. And I think perhaps to be doing anything like this now, regardless of the fact that 32 citizens have come out on a very small little area, on a small little street to oppose this, I think perhaps we're premature with this densification of that area at this time, so I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Obviously, I'm voting to decline this. I moved the motion. As Councillor McDonnell said, we heard from all kinds of people. We didn't hear from the proponents. We've had a great deal of good work done by staff around the issue of densifying existing neighborhoods, finding the best possible ways to do that. If this had come forward with some suggestion as to what was to be built, how it was to fit into the neighborhood, I might have been sold on it, but not in the vast unknown that we've been presented with. The only thing I know for sure is that none of the neighbors want to see this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. Well, when we moved this forward, I expressed my concern that this wouldn't be something that would be well received by the residents, that it didn't seem to fit in with the community. It certainly wasn't consistent with the other lot sizes that were there. But you never know. Sometimes we get no opposition at all. And this time we did, and I think that we've heard the residents, and I don't see how we can move forward with this at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Well, I'm always impressed when people make an effort to come out and make sure that their voices get heard. When I was looking at the order of business for the public hearing, 4 of the 5 items are about increasing density in our city, and it's all on existing built-out areas. And we're just going to see more and more of this. So I'm going to support declining, but I think we need to recognize and we need to start paying attention to, so how are we going to do this? Because we need to do it in a way that's sensitive, that respects the existing residents, but also appreciate that if we're going to do anything about making housing more affordable and making sure that our children can stay here, then we're going to have to find a way to increase density so that our children can not only grow up here, but they can also raise their families here. So these are just some of the challenges we're going to have. While I do appreciate, the garden and the trees, and that's actually one of the things that struck me, is that we need to, if we're going to densify, then I'm worried that we're going to lose some of those older trees, well-established trees, that are neighbors' trees, not necessarily the trees that belong on the land that is being actually densified. So there are some things I think we still need to work out, so I'm going to support declining this application right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Score.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. I will not be supporting this also. I've got a lot of friends. I noticed there's 30 odd some households that certainly signed a petition against this development, and I certainly have an awful lot of friends that live up and down Haversley Street. That I've known for probably 40, 50 years. And they've called me long before this public hearing to say that it's a bad development, that they would not support it. And they normally don't make these kind of calls unless they're pretty serious. So I will not be supporting it.
Thank you. This is the challenge, and I think Councillor Robinson probably just laid it out the best, is that the older neighborhoods of Coquitlam it's really hard to run bus service. It's really hard to do a great deal of what community building we need to do in Coquitlam, and that does mean we have to provide better options for how we can make our neighborhoods have a wider range of affordable housing options, a wider range of affordable choices for residents. And I mean, our next generation will end up living in Abbotsford if we don't make the right decisions. So it's going to be a challenge all the way through. And yet, I don't think the proponent made the effort that has to be made in order to try to talk to the neighborhood and make the neighborhood understand what they're trying to do. As a couple of council members have said, that's not staff's job. Staff have done their job of processing this. The proponent is the one that has to do that, and if the proponent doesn't do it, and the neighborhood comes out en masse opposed to something, then it's council's job to understand and listen to the voices that we hear. This is a public hearing process, and obviously it's a process that only involves us hearing those that do come out to speak. So I will be supporting the motion to reject this application. Seeing no other speakers. Motion is declined. All in favor? Opposed? It's declined unanimously.
Thank you. Item 4 is Bylaw 4227, and this is at 1011 Quadling Avenue. The staff recommendation is that Council give second and third readings to zoning amendment bylaw 4227, as well as fourth and final reading to zoning amendment bylaw 4227.
Move recommendation. Second.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reid, Chair of the Land Use Committee.
Thank you. Through to Mr. McIntyre. This is in an area of hopeful redevelopment and for affordable housing. The thing that I have to ask you about is we had some discussion at Land Use Committee about trees on property lines in these older areas. And although it was mentioned very briefly in here, I would like to know if staff have taken any action to assure that trees that are on property lines are somehow protected. Can you give me an answer, please?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Some good questions. As it was raised before at committee and council, we've relayed that on to the applicant, so it's really been flagged for them that if their project does go ahead, this is something we'll be watching closely. So specific to this one, it has been flagged and will be dealt with. More generally, and I think this comes from the last town hall meeting we had, remember up at Poirier back in, I think it was May, there were some questions around that. And I think as I've mentioned before, one of the takeaways for me in our department was looking at ways to better inform and educate some of the builders and contractors. Sometimes they get busy looking at the property they're working on and get ignoring what might be happening on the neighboring properties, particularly trees and that. So we have prepared an information brochure. It's just about finished. Once we have it in a more final form, we'll get a copy of that to council. So the idea is to get information out, just give people a heads up, sort of look before you dig and think about, if you have any questions, contact the staff, and we'll try to assist in making sure that you don't have these problems in the future.
Well, I hope an information brochure is good enough, because we can end up with lots of civil suits around the city if these things aren't adhered to. So I have great concern. I think that we could probably do a little better than an information brochure, but...
And if I could, Your Worship, and perhaps Raul will comment as well. There has been discussions between planning staff and some of the bylaw enforcement and urban forestry staff around trying to tighten up and making sure that these inadvertent mistakes don't happen and how to deal with that. I'm not sure. Raul, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes, thanks, Jim. Through the chair. We have continued to discuss the matter of trees and coordinate that with the building division staff when building permits come in, as well as our urban forestry staff and bylaw enforcement, as Mr. McIntyre has mentioned. On this particular development, there's a cedar tree located around on the adjacent property at 1007 Quadling, and it does have a root zone encroaching on this property, and the applicant has agreed to fence that area off and protect that root zone. We've had our urban forestry staff look at that, make sure that they have the appropriate area to save the tree. So that's the level of detail we can go to in cases where there's a possibility to save adjacent trees.
Or maybe they have to hire a QEP to give a certificate or something like that. As long as you've got it on your radar, I'll be happy for now. Thank you.
Thank you. No other speakers? Motion's on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is Bylaw 4230. This is for 615, 617, 621 Smith Avenue. The staff recommendation is to give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4230.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I will be supporting this. There's been a lot of work go into this through Land Use Committee as well as staff. I'd like to thank the applicant for the nice building. I like the lower profiles. I like the clean lines. I like the stone exteriors. Glad to see that parking is being adhered to. One of the things that Ms. Richter so nicely pointed out to us is that do we pay attention to what's going in around these places? And yes, we do. We have the Coquitlam Community Association. They give us advice. They give staff advice on things like that. We have a park 3 doors away from this. We have another park that will be across the street and in behind coming up. We do look at Smith as a collector road, so it will be widened. There's lots of things that will take place, and sometimes they're a little later taking place than some of the development, because if we can get somebody else to pay for it instead of us, we really like that. And that saves us taxpayer dollars as well. So at any time, any citizen can come in and look at the OCP and see what parks and roads and what's going to be happening around developments are going on. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I too will be supporting this. I do appreciate the some of the more subtle things that the developer has considered, but I also want to thank Hildegard Richter for bringing forward some really well-spoken thoughts, and it's one that I think we need to start turning our minds to, because that whole area is going to densify dramatically, and we can't ignore the fact that those folks are going to need some resources and amenities. And earlier today at the land use meeting, we talked about the neighborhood plan and taking a quick look at it to see if there's some things that we can put in place to help sort of manage some of those challenges. But it will need, I think, a thorough look, and we've put forward a timetable to do just that, because you're right. If you keep bringing people in, there are resources that they're going to need, and we need to make sure that we're able to take care of that. So it's coming. So thank you for bringing that forward. It's important.
So true that the revitalization of a neighborhood requires amenities. We know that. They're really hard to put in place absent the revitalization. This is a process that actually, I think, will enable the development of those amenities that you spoke about, and I thank you very much. Seeing no other speakers, motion is second and third. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 6 is actually the consideration of the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy. as I said earlier, we had some technical difficulties incorporating the items from this afternoon, so I'm going to put the recommendation on the document camera, just so that it is in front of people to read. This item, which was on the regular council agenda for this evening, involves the consideration of the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy. Staff recommendation is to advise the Metro Vancouver Regional Board that in accordance with Section 857 of the Local Government Act, that the City of Coquitlam accepts the Regional Growth Strategy as contained in the Regional Growth Strategy Bylaw 1136, Metro Vancouver 2040, Shaping Our Future, and as refined by the implementation agreement already accepted by Council on July 18, 2011.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. This has been a long, dragged-out kind of situation, and I'm delighted that I phoned Metro Vancouver the other day, and he did tell me that the golf course in Westwood Plateau is going into exactly what the residents have asked for. But I said I'd hope that it would go through before November's election. So I'm quite pleased that but also there's been a lot of stories floating around of what's true, what's wrong, what happened, why wasn't this dealt with a year ago, why did it come up at last minute? So there'll be a lot of questions to be asked on Friday at the GVD, which I intend to ask. But in the meantime, I will be supporting it because I think it's a good thing. With what I'm hearing from Metro Vancouver Board of Directors, it's there's some different stories out there that are floating, and I'm going to clear it up on Friday. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora, of course, is one of our two reps to Metro Vancouver. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be supporting this, and as Councillor Sikora said, it was a long, drawn-out. I am amazed that we could capture in 4.5 lines of a recommendation all the work that went on over a long, long, long period of time, which I was really pleased that I was not part of that team, but they did a bunch of really good work for us. I'm not going to go into a whole, once again, recounting of what we saw wrong with the regional growth strategy and the work that went into getting it improved to the point where I'm prepared to support it, and I expect most of council certainly will be prepared to support it. I don't think we need to revisit all that. I think it's important, though, to recognize that this city and this city council were alone amongst the metro municipalities in standing up and taking a really hard look at the regional growth strategy, determining where they found it wanting, inappropriate for us and for the region, and attempting to fix it. And I think we did fix it quite well. Perhaps not as well as we might have hoped, but quite well. And I think that's an important piece of work that we've done for everybody. And I want to acknowledge our team, the Mayor, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Reid, who went down and worked really hard at Metro to get us to the point where we can approve this today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I, too, will acknowledge Councillor Reid and Councillor Robinson, who joined me in the negotiations over almost 12 weeks. It was the negotiations themselves. The face-to-face took a couple of weeks, over 4 meetings, but the somewhat extended negotiations to get to the face-to-face meetings were unduly long and drawn out, and it was an eye-opening process. However, we did get somewhere. We did, I think, raise a number of points that I'm pleased that our city council raised. I'm pleased that this community raised them. This regional growth strategy will guide the future of the region for the next generation and a half, next 30 years. And we were able to identify concerns with that by itself, and therefore put in place some processes that take place after 5 years and after 10 years, which I think really improve the document and have the potential for solving problems that might arise, because there's absolutely no way that we, in our wisdom, know what this region, know all of the details of this region's challenges and opportunities in 30 years. We don't have that. This process wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it was important. I think our council, made the right decision. I know made the right decision to challenge and raise those concerns, and that we now, I think, have an opportunity to move forward in building new bridges at the region, and I think have a much better regional growth strategy to guide this future and to make it as livable as possible for the next generation, because that's really who we have to be arguing for. The next generation is going to inherit this agreement from us, and we don't want them to look back and recognize it as a mistake or as having been flawed. It isn't perfect in any case, but it isn't. It at least now has a process that can fix errors and review it and reconsider every aspect of it. And I look forward to the possibilities that will offer councils in the future. Councillor McDonough.
Thank you. Well, nothing's changed too much for me from last week. I still can't accept this. There are just far too many inconsistencies. One thing that was noted last week, which I'm very thankful for, I think our city alone amongst the other cities in the Lower Mainland really had a chance to go over this and read it and get to know it. And that was as a direct result as some of our residents who pushed us and forced us to really get into the meat of this strategy. And there's just far too many inconsistencies. I hope that Metro Vancouver is going to act on Coquitlam's requests for consideration on a 5-year breakout so that we can review it after 5 years. But I don't hold out a lot of hope that Metro will. I hope that'll happen, but I still can't vote for this. Too many inconsistencies, and it'll take 30 years, the whole term of this strategy, just to work out some of the work out those inconsistencies. So I think I'm going to be alone in this.
You must stand up for what you believe in. Yeah. Sometimes you must stand alone. Yeah. Councillor Robinson.
Don't we know about standing alone? So I'm going to support this. And Councillor McDonnell sort of was thinking, so how did we get so embroiled into this RGS? Because really when it came to us, it was sort of like, well, okay, yeah, that looks fine. So I want to actually extend a thank you to the Westwood Plateau folks and others who really pushed us, certainly pushed me to read in great detail and understand the complexities. And as a new, well, I guess I'm not going to be new soon, but as a new councillor, it was very eye-opening to go through the process. And we certainly thank staff for all their support, and we've sort of thanked each other for the support we got in moving this forward. But I hadn't taken the opportunity to thank the Westwood Plateau folks and others, because it really certainly pushed me to pay attention to what the implications were. And I think that's really important. So I'm going to support this because I think we got it the best we can, and we need to move forward. And I have a pile of paper like this sitting on my desk that I look forward to removing, shredding. Thank you.
Yes, we did kill trees in the process. Councillor Lynch.
Well, I'm going to be supporting this. I'm pleased that there was an implementation agreement that was reached, although, as I've stated before, I think really what we've achieved here is reports and workshops, and nothing substantially changed. I agree with Councillor McDonnell on that. However, beyond this, once we pass this, we'll move on to the next step, the regional context statement, that gives us another chance to set things in stone and protections for our city. And I believe, is that a 2-year time frame we have to complete that now?
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah. So it's not over, and there'll be more work to go forward. But I think that we do have to pass this right now. We have to move forward, and I agree with you, Mayor, that there's some relationship building that needs to happen, and perhaps that we can build those bridges, our staff can build those bridges, and we can move forward with the regional initiatives that we have coming forward.
Thank you. Absolutely. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I too am going to support this. As an observer in this process, attending the first meeting, I thought after that first meeting that there wasn't a hope that we would ever be able to come to an agreement. We really actually, Councillor Robinson, Reid, and Mayor Stewart got us a long, long way. And although it's not the perfect solution, we've got more than what we had, and we've bettered the process. And so in the future, when there's other types of plans coming forth, this one sets a really good example for other municipalities to follow. And so it's in that vein that although if we had continued on and things hadn't worked out, we may well have lost a lot of what we've achieved in this process. So although it's not perfect, I am going to support it, and I think we need to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Well, ditto to pretty well everything that was said. I think we did the right thing. At some time you have to believe in who you are and what you know and what you believe in, and have the courage of your convictions to stand up for it, and we did. I did thank the Westwood Plateau, Tom Cox, last week for putting us through this, because once he started, we, of course, went in depth on this and then realized we were in the middle of a minefield. Although we didn't accomplish everything that we hoped to do, which was to actually change the document, we did manage to get an implementation agreement and some other things that meant a lot to us and hopefully to other cities. I think now it's left to the province, and whoever the new government may be, I hope they will take a long and hard look at this, because it's who is going to be running the province. Is it Metro Vancouver is going to be running the Lower Mainland, or is it the elected body of the province, the provincial government, whoever they may be? And I think we've opened the door, and that's about all we can do. That's all we're legislated to do. So I'm proud of us. I'm proud of you, Mayor Stewart, for the way you pulled it together. Councillor Robinson and I were sitting there trying to get in and put our shots in, but I think you did a yeoman's job for the city on this strategy. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. I think our council deserves a lot of support for willing to stand up and object to certain issues within the RGS. And standing alone as we did, but I think we gained a lot of respect throughout the region of people for taking a stand and making this document a better document than it was. I concur with Councillor McDonnell. There's a hope on some of our issues that we negotiated, but I do believe over time that the 5-year clause will become very important for all municipalities to have, because no 30-year plan that we look back has ever stayed the same. Things change, and it needs to be updated. We've moved along a great ways. Metro Vancouver is not a perfect organization. I think there's a lot of issues around the table here that led to our concerns about how Metro operates and how they deal with us. And even the negotiations, when we get a document at 5:01 on a Friday to give them a response on a Monday, showed how sometimes they will play a game with us. But our staff, our council members did a great job at dealing with those issues and coming up with a document that helps move us forward, gets us into this. As it was mentioned, we could have go to binding arbitrations and be put into this through the provincial government's arbitration process and not gotten any of the improvements that we did through this process. So it was well worth the process to go through it, to do it, and gain some benefits and improve the document. And now I'll be supporting this and moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to reiterate that, as Councillor Asmussen said, those were 5:01, 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and we needed a response at 9 a.m. on Monday, and it was going to require 16 hours of staff time, and sometime between those two, staff got it done. And Mr. McIntyre, you went through a cross-examination like I've never seen. Mr. Alueva, thank you very much for all of the support that absolutely everybody did. Mr. Irvin, absolutely a tremendous support from our staff across City Hall. A great job, well done. And I'm going to ask perhaps our city manager if he wants to sum up how the process went from his perspective.
That was easy.
any more comments than that?
Oh, that was sick. Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. The motion before us is that Council advise Metro Vancouver that we accept the RGS as refined by the implementation agreement. All in favor? Opposed? I know the feeling. Councillor McDonnell is opposed. The motion carries nearly unanimously. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is actually item 7, and it pertains to a conservation permit application for 1430 Pipeline Road. The recommendation from the Standing Committee this afternoon is that Council refer this application back to staff to work with the owner's professional consultants in order to complete the technical requirements, and that the owner undertake further public consultation prior to the application being presented to Council for further consideration.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson. I'll go with that. Councillor Nicholson seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously.
Item 8.
The other item 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that conservation permit for 4104 Cedar Drive and surrounding properties located between Devon and Freemont Streets. Staff recommendations the Council approve the issuance of this conservation permit. Phase 2 and Phase 3, subject to conditions noted on Attachment 1 to this report, to One World Farms Incorporated, located at 4104 Cedar Drive and adjacent properties.
Moved by Councillor Remer, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
This is item 9, and it's a preliminary report and applications for citywide official community plan amendment bylaw 4235 and zoning amendment bylaw 4234 in order to amend the industrial zones. Staff recommendations that Council give first reading to see Coquitlam citywide official community plan amendment bylaw 4235, first reading to zoning amendment bylaw 4234, and that these two bylaws be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Remer, second by Councillor Robinson. Was it close? Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Remer. Their voices are too similar. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10 is consideration of fourth and final reading of zoning amendment bylaw 4205. This is the authorization for the issuance of a development permit at 539 to 557 Foster Avenue. Staff, the recommendation from the Standing Committee is that Council give fourth and final reading to save Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4205 and approve the signing and sealing of development permit for these addresses, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute this.
Moved by Councillor Remer, second by Councillor Robinson. This hasn't taken very long. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is consideration of fourth and final reading of zoning amendment bylaw 4223 at 3465 Princeton Avenue. Staff recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4223.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 12 is consideration of zoning amendment bylaw 4209. This is for the C5 community commercial zone, and 4213. This is rezoning of 955 Austin Avenue. Staff recommendation is that Council receive the letter from BD Development Group requesting that Council consider these bylaws in relation to the proposed mixed-use high-rise development at 955 Austin Avenue. That Council receive for consideration the options outlined in the report from the General Manager of Planning and Development dated July 18th, and that proceed with staff recommendations to undertake either options 2 or 3, which include direction to staff to undertake further public consultation on the Austin Heights neighborhood plan.
I'm going to turn to Councillor Reid, who's the chair of the Land Use Committee. I believe she's got a motion to make.
I do, Your Worship. I would like to move item 1 as shown on the screen.
Option 1, yeah. Okay.
And item 2 as shown on the screen. I will delete what is printed on the screen as item 3 and instead substitute it with option 2 with another clause added, which is to direct staff to withhold processing of applications for high-rise developments in Austin Heights until the neighborhood center plan policies and C5 zone are reviewed with respect to building heights in the context of the comments received at the public hearing, and so return to council for consideration and direction for further public consultation.
I'm going to assume that deletes 4 and 5 of option 2.
It does. I'm just going to say that. Do
Okay,
you want me to read the first item on option 2, or will you read it?
Option 2 should be up on the screen now.
Not quite.
In the context of, okay, there you go. Okay. Endorse.
Okay, so it's to endorse a reduction in the building height proposed by the applicant as per their letter dated July 11th from 24 to 19 stories to a maximum of approximately 195 feet, and request registration of a restrictive covenant in this regard. To give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Text Amendment Bylaw number 4209, which is the C5 zone, and to give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4213, which is 955 Austin, and I so move all of that.
It was seconded by Councillor Robinson, moved by Councillor Reid, an amended version of option 2 from the staff report. Councillor Reid, did you have anything, do you want to open your comments with that?
I do. I took great pains to try and figure out how I can look at the policies in the C5 zone and the policies surrounding the neighborhood center plan. We have worked on this plan I've been involved for about 3 years, so I know staff has been involved a long time. This was a great plan, and there was a lot of consultation. At the public hearing, the folks that came there, I tried to listen to absolutely everything they had to say, and I did, and it gave me a lot of thought to go back and ask staff to look at how we can direct and look further into our C5 zone. I think we have to start somewhere, and it's always hard for people to start with something new, but this is an iconic site. This is a very important site for this city, and I have been around here for several years, and it's been very difficult to get anything started on the south slope of Coquitlam. I'm very happy that this developer has come forward. We have a developer of excellent reputation with a building that is designed absolutely beautifully. I take into consider great things for this neighborhood. I take into consideration that we can have the street that we can close off and have little mini festivals and things on it being Ridgeway. I look at the opportunities that are there. I look at the opportunities that have happened in North Vancouver with the Royal Canadian Legion that have taken their little one-story building and put 9 or 10 stories on it to help house the veterans in their senior years. These are opportunities that are there where people don't have to move out of the neighborhood. You look at the price point that this developer put out that was presented by some of the citizens at the public hearing. This will allow some of our kids to stay in the neighborhood. It will allow some of us to downsize and stay in the neighborhood. All these things are important. We have to start somewhere, and this is where we have chosen to start. The recommendation that I put forward as number 4 on directing staff to withhold processing of applications is so we can look at C5, look at the plan that we and hundreds of people, and I see some of them here, from Aaron from the BIA and Larry, I see lots of people here that we've worked with over the last 3 years on this. Most important that we've listened to them and they've put hours and hours of their time in. This was a good process, a very good process, and I think that in a few years we will have, what is it my dad used to say, the proof is in the pudding, I guess, and so I hope that we're going to have a spectacular building and the beginning of a totally revised Austin area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much, Mayor. To the planning department, this 19-story building, will it require a public hearing?
Through the chair, Your Worship, should council approve the motions before council today, there would be no further public hearing. The development permit would have to come forward before council for the design of the building.
So no public hearing?
Well, we just...
Okay, and that's what's bothering me. Mayor, I'll tell you, the developer, there's no question about it. He's a great developer. He developed many things since I've been on council in 1972 on. Developed many, many good projects. So as far as the developer is concerned, I have no problem. As far as the Austin Heights Community Association, they've done a tremendous job with all these meetings. There's no two ways about it, working hard. However, there was a lot of people turned out at public hearing, and I know that you say, well, it's been going on for 2 or 3 years or 4 or 5 years. Well, maybe it has been, but there's certainly a lot of residents in the area didn't know about this high-rise. I know that this high-rise just came up about in the last 6 months. I don't think any council member knew, at least I didn't, because there was no mention of 28-story high-rise coming aboard. But however, it's here, and the thing is that to me, whether it be 19 stories or 28 stories, there's a difference of 9 stories that ought to force a public hearing. To be fair, there's a change. It's a substantive change. Years ago, when there was a substantive change, you had to go to another public hearing. And you know something? Maybe somebody will challenge this bylaw from that community area in the community and may have to go to public hearing, because I believe this should go back to public hearing. Be fair to the people, residents in the Coquitlam. We can't sideswipe them. They were all here. There was about 200 people here that spoke against it for one reason or another, and we got to honor that. So while you're honoring that, today you're closing the doors on the same people. Because if you would have told them here 2 months ago or so that this thing will never have to have another public hearing, then I would have never supported it going back to the Land Use Committee. Because that's sideswiping our residents, not giving them a chance to speak. And we clearly heard from the residents in this community that they may go for 8 or 10 stories. Now, 8 or 10 stories may not be viable for a cement building, but you may be able to talk them into going for about 12. But to not give a chance for our taxpayers in our community to voice their concerns is ludicrous. And another thing, this thing looks like the planning department had put everything aside and worked on nothing else but this, because I've never seen anything brought forward so fast in my life. In my 40 years on council, I've never seen anything move so rapidly ahead. So that is really disturbing to me. To me, I think option 3 would have been the perfect option, but however, we have option 2 on the floor that I'll be voting against, because I don't think we're not being fair to the taxpayers. That's the only thing that bothers me. Not only that, we're going to have I don't know how many suites there'll be on 19-floor suites. There's nothing here as far as what it's going to look like or anything else. Just the fact that it's going to be 19 stories. And all the cars from there will be going on Ridgeway. Ridgeway is a very, very narrow street, and it's got many, many problems as it is now. And all that do is create more and more problems. And look, do I believe in having Austin Avenue redeveloped? Of course I do. I think there's many ways. Now, if this goes through, maybe the next one will be 42 stories, 45 stories, 50 stories. What else is going to happen? See, the taxpayers in that area of the community will not trust anybody anymore as far as politicians are concerned. And I don't blame them, because politicians earn the right to be hated, to do things that are not what the public wants. And every one of you council members heard the public here at the public hearing. They don't mind. Maybe this 19 stories will go through. Have another public hearing. What's the hurry? What's wrong with having another public hearing? Let the people speak. Yes or no. That's what I'd like to hear. I'd like to know what I'm voting for, whether the public's accepting it or not. It may be the nicest building in the world. It may be a great building. It may be a great way of developing Austin Avenue, but the public has been, the door has been closed on it. And that's the only thing that I'm really concerned about. And I hope that the area residents in that area go out and vote this fall at election time and tell people, I'm not accepting the way you're treating us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
So this is what they call silly season, is it?
Yep.
It started. Okay. So I seconded this motion because process is important to me and public hearings are important to me. And the public did come out and speak. But there was a process that went on before this building ever came to this council. There was a process that involved hundreds of staff hours and hundreds of volunteer hours to put together a plan for this neighborhood. And that plan went to public hearing. And there was opportunity for lots of people to talk about and provide input. And I think it's important that we respect that process too. And in that plan, it's very clear, if you read it, you will see it does call for high rises. It calls for several high rises. It doesn't say 50 or 45 stories, it just says high rises. So what I like is that because we did hear what the public had to say, is that we're going to take a look at that, look at the building heights. Maybe we do need to put something on that. And so we have heard from the public hearing around this building, we've learned and we've heard that we need to put something more specific in there. So I also want to respect the public, and the public has spoken about the plan. And so we have a plan, and I think we have some responsibility to follow through with that plan in some respects. And to say, well, we're going to change the plan, we're not going to do high rises, well then that's actually, I think, rather disrespectful of a whole process and a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of taxpayer money that went into putting that plan together. And I'm not prepared to walk away from that because I do think it's a good plan. I do think we had good process of putting it together. And I think we owe it to the residents to act on that. So I am going to support and move this forward. Do I think there's some work that we need to do to tweak it? Absolutely. And that's why I'm supporting the amendment, because we did hear what the public had to say at the public hearing for this specific building. And I think we need to act on that. And in terms of staff working hard to get this through, I want to point out that there were 11 items on today's land use committee, and I think staff have been working on many different projects and working hard to get through as much as they can before we took our break so that things don't get stalled. So I think everything received a fair bit of staff time, and I appreciate them doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I agree with everything Councillor Robinson has said. I am going to fully support this. 200 or 300 people signed off on the Austin Heights neighborhood plan, and as Councillor Robinson says, to turn on that and to do a process again would be unjust and unfair to all those people that put all those hours into it. We heard from the public at the public hearing, and that public at our public hearings fully supported revitalization of Austin Heights. And the question was how much density, what are the heights going to be? This amendment that Councillor Reid has come forth with will give us a good opportunity to discuss building height. And but in the meantime, I think that out of fairness, we need to put this application through. I do note that the Beatty Group has made a substantial adjustment. It was originally going to be 24 stories. It's now going to be 19 in view of the what we heard at the public hearing. So I thank them for that, and I look forward to supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be voting in support of this. I have a number of somewhat disconnected responses. When I saw this in my package on Thursday night, my immediate reaction was somewhat similar to Councillor Score's. We can't do this. This should go back to public hearing. We had all that noise at the public hearing, and we seem to be ignoring it. Fortunately, it was Thursday night and not Monday morning, because that gave me time to stop and think and consider. So I went back and looked. I looked at the minutes of the public hearing. So there may have been quite a few people in the council chamber, but in fact 33 people spoke against, and 11 people spoke in favor. And at least 2 of the people who spoke in favor spoke on behalf of the BIA, of groups within the community. So the numbers are not quite as overwhelming as they sound. And if I then, as I did, back up and say, okay, exactly how did we get to where we are in this difficult position that we may be in, which is no longer difficult for me. We had a long, arduous process to develop the Austin Heights neighborhood plan. Councillor Reamer points out a few hundred people signed off on the Austin Heights neighborhood plan. I attended most of the open house events. I saw the participation. I heard people asking hard questions of staff and getting answers that seemed to satisfy them, or sometimes we'll need to take that and go away and make a change. So it was developed by a whole lot of people working hard together. So in fact, the total public input on the Austin Heights neighborhood plan, which clearly contemplated the possibility of high-rises, was in favor of the plan and of high-rise development in Austin Heights. That by itself is enough to bring me to vote in support of this. But there's another factor as well, and that's the responsibility of an elected body. I think we have to listen to people, but you can't go on listening and go on consulting and go on consulting. There's a point at which you have to say, I've heard everything that I need to hear, and it's time for us to make a decision. We're responsible to all the people of the city, but we're also responsible to all the people who come and do business in our city and give us places to live, places to shop, neighborhoods to live in. I'm looking forward to the Austin Heights neighborhood, and I'm looking forward to a landmark entry to this development. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have a few comments of my own. We heard from people on both sides at the public hearing. The majority of the people we heard were opposed to high-rises, and the majority of those actually said that this is brand new to them. They hadn't heard of the issue before. They hadn't heard of this. And that was perhaps the most frustrating part of this, because I know how much council and how much staff and how much the Business Improvement Association and the Austin business community had gone, how much effort they'd gone to try to raise the profile of this issue. I actually had staff in my office a couple of days later pouring through the documents that led up to the approval of the Austin Heights plan, because I wanted to make sure that, in fact, they did actually include reference to high-rise, and they did. Actually, the high-rises were shown in 2009 documents, not a couple of months before, but almost a couple of years before. That we heard reference to, in fact, the efforts that staff had made to get people to the public information meetings and the public process, to get the public engaged in developing that plan. Because developing the plan is what you do ahead of receiving applications. You reach out to the development community and say, here's a plan that the community has developed. And this wasn't council's plan, this was the community's plan. The community developed this plan. And in order to get those people out, we had the staff offered, they had a French pastry chef at one point. They had free daycare. They had all kinds of processes designed to get the public to engaged if they could, and to encourage and to advertise and to promote. And it was on the front page of local newspapers, and it was in flyers. And council is determined to be as public as possible. It does frustrate me when someone suggests that we're circumventing the public. We're not at all. You go to a public hearing and you try to respond as best you can. In this case, the response is a 25% reduction in the building height. If we then went back to public hearing and made another adjustment, and then went back to public hearing and made another adjustment, and obviously at some point you can't do that. The process does allow that you can reduce density after a public hearing and without calling in place another public hearing. And that's what we've called for in this case, or that's what the applicant has proposed. So I'm not uncomfortable with that. Clearly council has to consider again how it engages the public, not because we haven't done a good job, not because staff haven't done a good job, but because the public hasn't been, a great many of them haven't felt engaged. And if they don't feel engaged, if they don't feel informed, then we've got to try other ways. Clearly, we're not going to reach everybody, but I want to make sure that we, as much as possible, reach folks. In this case, we're trying to revitalize the neighborhood. On an earlier item, we heard in Coquitlam the necessity of revitalizing the amenities, revitalizing the entire neighborhood. And in order to do that, you have to produce the kinds of densities, the kinds of neighborhood plan that will encourage the revitalization of the neighborhood. And the plan that the community came up with clearly raised the interest of a key developer, a developer that everyone on council respects and everyone on council thinks it's great that the Beatty Group is there for proposing to do some work in Coquitlam, particularly in such a high-profile neighborhood as Austin Heights. You have to be able to make sure as well, though, that you're proposing a building form that will actually be able to be developed. And there's no question that we hear over and over again that you can't develop 10-story concrete buildings in a marketplace that embraces high-rises. There are cities in the world where they only have 6-story buildings, and that's what you do. But in Greater Vancouver, because we're 22 distinct municipalities, we each have to try to encourage the redevelopment of our own neighborhoods. And so we have to find a form that will do that. And the community did. The community, through a 2.5-year process, I think they came up with a plan that they're pretty proud of. And to dismiss that plan, to say that that plan isn't good because some people weren't engaged in the process, I don't think we can do that. And so I fully respect Councillor Robinson's comments that the process has to be respected. At the same time, we have to embrace the concerns of those residents that weren't engaged and find ways of further engaging as much as we can. So I look forward to the process that we'll move forward into now as to how do we examine again the plan that was come up with so that we can, as much as possible, allay concerns and identify ways that the community can fully embrace what I think is a pretty good plan. And so I thank all those participants over the 2.5 years, and I certainly thank all those people that came to the public hearing and expressed both for and against on this application. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this as well. In March, this council unanimously passed the area plan, and at that time we praised the community involvement and the number of people who came out, and we made a big deal about that. But we don't pass everything. If you were here earlier, you saw that we turned down Haversley, a development that we're passing most other places in Coquitlam. And the reason we did that is because we heard from the area residents and we listened and we didn't want it. For this process, sure, the last public hearing, we had a number of residents come out and speak against this, and some of them were quite passionate. However, I've spoken with hundreds of people who want this, and they far outnumber the people that are against it. I think that this is important to, like Councillor Robinson said, it's important to respect that process. I'm very happy that, like was mentioned earlier, this is an iconic property. We've got a tremendous builder. We've got a beautiful apartment that's going to go up there, a building that I think we're all going to be very proud of, and it's going to really set the tone for how Austin Heights is going to evolve over the next 10, 15 years. I'm very anxious to see how we go down that road. So I'll be supportive and look forward to it.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. Well, some interesting things to consider here. I thought I heard Councillor Reid say that she was replacing number 3, but this is number 4. So this is an addition? Okay, thank you. So we had option 2, we had option 3. This is kind of a hybrid. I guess one of the things that I'm considering right now is I'm looking at, we're talking about public consultation, both the recommendation as amended with number 4 and option 3 talks about public consultation. So what would that consultation have been, and how do they differ between this hybrid and the option 3, which is the one that I was, quite frankly, initially leading towards? What is that public consultation we're talking about? Another open house? It's not a public hearing, I think, as Councillor Sequoia was suggesting. Well, I'm just reading option 3, bullet 2 says with additional public consultation, and the one you've just presented, bullet 4.
You're talking 12C, are you? I have crossed that one out, deleted C.
I'm going with option 3 that was in the report that we discussed at the committee meeting today, that has, option 3 has 3 bullets. Option 2 has been amended to have 4 bullets as you presented it, and I'm trying to compare the two.
Well, I wasn't even looking at option 3. I didn't like it.
Well, but they both have the same wording. I'm trying to see, is there a difference in wording? This is a hybrid that we seem to be doing here. We seem to be merging option 3 and option 2 to come up with something in between. And it's public consultation is referenced in both of the options now. And I'm trying to ascertain exactly what that means to me.
Well, I didn't come up with something between 3 and 2. I was taking option 2. I removed 2 bullets from option 2 and replaced it with what was on the screen a few moments ago, which is a new line.
I have that.
Mine is 2, and what I meant, and I'm not even discussing option 3, so what I want to do is look at the neighborhood center plan policies that we've put in place, and with respect to the C5 zone, and look at building heights, and we want to examine them and examine what we showed on the plans and where they were and how many there might be and how many options there are, and that's what we're looking at.
That's not my question. My question is, what would the public consultation consist of?
I don't know that there will be. It says for further public consultation.
It says so right. It says right here. Yeah, for further public consultation.
Well, I'm sorry, Councillor Lynch.
I'm sorry. First of all, Councillor Lynch, the wording isn't identical. The wording is significantly different, but the wording that is before us now is that further public consultation be entered into to help direct Council's decision related to neighborhood center plan policies and C5 zone. So perhaps we can ask staff how we might be able to engage the public and have the public consultation process that engages both the Austin Heights BIA and the groups that have helped develop the plan, as well as the people who had concerns about building height. And Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. What we try to do in laying out some options here is try to anticipate and provide various choices. The option 2 has been modified at Council's request, and actually I think it sharpens it up a bit. It makes it clear what is sort of the area of concern and the sequence here. So there'd still be public consultation as I read the amended option 2. It's that staff will go back and we will look at in both the Austin Heights neighborhood plan, the center policies, and the C5 zone around the concerns of building heights, because now it doesn't have maximum height. So let's look at that. And so in the context of the comments received at the previous public hearing, we would report back through committee to council around suggested refinements, modifications, amendments to both the neighborhood plan and the zoning, and at that time council would consider that. And if they were given the go-ahead to go back and prepare bylaws, there would be certainly a public hearing, but there may be other options or other opportunities for earlier public consultations. So I think the notion of public consultation is captured in here. It would depend on the changes coming forward in the direction of council at that time.
And if I may, Your Worship, the reason that we put that in here for further public consultation, but it comes back for consideration and direction from council, is I don't know what exactly we want to go out with. We've left this as a menu for actually being able to go out to the public for consultation on height, consultation on almost anything. We've left it wide open. That's council direction.
Okay, and so, Mr. Mayor, I'm fully aware there's differences in the wording, which is why I'm trying to clarify. And this has come forward as an amendment, some brainstorming session, which I appreciate, between what the committee was dealing with until now, which is why I'm trying to get a handle on what it is. And I don't know if public consultation means we're going to send out a batch of letters, and if you answer us, yes, and if you don't, no, or if you're going to rent another room somewhere in Executive Inn and ask people to show up. That's what I'm trying to clarify. So it's wide open. So we really...
Wide open.
Yeah, whatever. So we don't know exactly what that is. And I have no problem with the developer. I've fully supported other developments in the community does. I'm pleased with that. I, quite frankly, have been hearing more people who are concerned. They knew there was going to be high-rises, but in their mind they weren't thinking 19 or 20-some-odd stories. In their mind they were thinking significantly lower, and that's what they've telling me. And when we referred this back to staff, I wasn't sure what was coming back, but I didn't anticipate it being as high as it is. And I don't know that if we were to have another public hearing, that we would have significantly less people being opposed to it. And there may be only 33 people, but that's the way it is. There's a certain amount of people come and they're representing X amount of groups and stuff. And I think that if I read the difference between the two, we're talking about giving second, third, and fourth reading to the bylaw 4209. That's significant. But we're only giving second and third to the 4213, which is the developer's application, I believe. Right? Is that correct?
Your Worship, the recommendations would be for the zoning bylaw text amendment to put in place the revised C5 zone. That the staff recommendation is to give that second, third, and finals. At least that's there on the books. For this particular application at 955 Austin, just second and third readings because it's held back at that point for our standard practices then to bring forward the development permit application. And at that time, there's fourth and final consideration by council and the decision whether or not to issue the DPs.
Okay. All right. So I think I have a better handle on the hybrid recommendation. And although I'm strongly opposed to it, I can say that I still favor the option number 3. I think that referring this back to staff, and I would certainly like to know what the public consultation really is going to mean. It's just too wide open for me. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. I've had some difficulties with this, and I'm thanking Mr. McIntyre. So on the bullet 3, we'll be giving second and third readings to the application for the high-rise, and fourth and final development becoming later. When we go out to consultation on the C5 zone and on the heights, would that also affect this application if people were unanimous in their responses back about 16 stories rather than 19? How would that affect this application in its, or is this not affected by that consultation? So is this all the consultation for everything, or is the consultation after this application?
Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, with the revised proposal put forward by the applicant, yes, it's being reduced to 19 stories, but along with that, the staff recommendation is that it be a restrictive covenant registered on the title to, if that's the commitment, that's, that's what's proposed, that's what's committed to. It's difficult to sort of prejudge what would happen through the bylaw review, or, the plan and the zone review, council's consideration, the public consultation. If in the end of the day that resulted in a lesser height, that may be one outcome. That may be at a height that's not feasible for development or construction in that area too. So I could see that as being part of the consideration at that stage. However, at this point, this is sort of committing this site to go forward as a 19-story high-rise building.
Okay, so council does have it. They received, I'm speaking up, we received a strong direction of a height. That would be information at that time that would come towards council at fourth and final to make that final decision. So we're still not approving fully. We're approving up to third reading. There's still fourth reading that if we have a strong consultation and information back to us, council still has the opportunity to accept or reject that application based on the information coming from consultation. Or can we not at that point? Are we stuck?
In my view, council, until it passes final reading with rezoning, has latitude to make a decision. So at this point, again, the proponent is proposing to revise their application, bring it down, and to sort of capture that proposal, restricted covenants being registered. So that's the sort of the bare minimum it would be. Council, at fourth reading at the time of DP, you're not absolutely committed to approve or not. There is latitude that way. But if the expectation is that that's going to be the project that's proposed, that's the DP that will be coming forward to council at that time. So that's what you should be expecting.
I understand they'll be coming forward for that, but there is that latitude with council's discretion at that time. Because my concern was that when we had the public hearing, and I'll agree that we went through the Austin Neighborhood Heights, we had lots of consultation. A lot of times, though, people don't tend to, and I know in the Northeast where I live, people don't tend to come out until the bulldozer's coming down their street. Then all of a sudden they go, what the heck's going on here? They don't pay attention. And I think that's just how people react. And the public hearing, I think, was like, oh my God, this is now coming to us. And my concern has been that we're saying we're going to go to consultation, and we said, well, my recollection of that public hearing was at the end of it, we said, we'd send this back to staff, and we'll go for consultation on the C5 and on the building heights. And now we're coming back to approve something. So I can support this at third readings, giving us the ability still at fourth to say, we've heard from the public, they are thumbs up towards the heights, or we've heard different. So I can move this forward because council still has an opportunity at fourth reading to revisit the issue.
Hate to do it. I'm left with the question as to whether or not council can receive further information on this application prior to fourth reading. And Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Now that Councillor Asmussen has put it that way, no, that would be something we'd want to avoid. On this particular application, the public hearing is closed, so that's the material, that's the information that council has to consider. So that now carries down along its own track if that's supported by council to DP. The separate piece of work would be for staff to go back and revisit the Austin Heights neighborhood plan, the neighborhood center policies, and the C5 zone. We would be reporting back. It would be later this year before we get to that piece of work, and with that there would be some clarity around the appropriate consultation, and that would then be there for council's consideration and direction. And I imagine we wouldn't be kicking that off until, well, in all honesty, early next year, I think would be a more realistic time frame. So I think the two can be kept separate, but we would have to be very careful about receiving new further information on this application after the public hearing is closed.
Okay. Well, that makes it difficult for me because my recollection of that means that what we said we're going to go up for consultation, and we're going to do it on C5 and on the heights. And what we're going to do now, and that was on this application, not on the neighborhood plan, but on this application. And now what we're saying is, no, we're going to, they've made a significant reduction. I don't disagree with that. But, so we're going to say we're going to pass this at 19 stories, and then we'll go to consultation for anything else that comes after this. And I don't think that's what was communicated by us at the end of that public hearing. That's not my recollection, that we would just communicate and do, because we would have to then also come back and do a text amendment if we had changed it to the C5 zone that's going to be passed here. So that's where my difficulty lies, and and if council can point out that I'm wrong in the direction that I felt that we gave at that time, is that we would go and consult first before we come back with this application. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, we're still left with an inability to, unfortunately, these rules are set by court. This is jurisprudence. This isn't necessarily good law. It's just the way the courts have responded over the years to various things. And as a result, our hands are somewhat tied in that we can't receive further information as a council about an application. Now, we look before us, option 2, item 1, 2, and 3 are about this application. And we should be considering them perhaps separately. Item 4 is, what do we do about the area plan? Do we revisit the area plan? And option 4 is item 4 is suggesting that let's go back and have a look at the area plan, the neighborhood center plan policies, and the C5 zone, and consider how we respond to what the public has to say partly what the public has to say in the public hearing, but also engage the public more fully on some questions that were raised at the public hearing. That one could be dealt with separately, and I'd entertain a motion if we want to separate off item 4, because item 1, 2, and 3 are about the things that we must do without getting further public consultation. Item 4 is get further public consultation on some questions, but we cannot vote on this matter, on item 1, 2, and 3, essentially the matter before us today. We cannot vote on this matter once we've received further information. So, you're comfortable with that, Councillor Reid?
I'm very comfortable with that.
Okay.
I could have put item 4
Okay.
on its own, but Your Worship, I think you've explained it well.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. So we don't have a second round for the debate.
No. Question.
Certainly, Councillor Reid spoke about 3 times. So
Well, Councillor Reid,
did not.
Councillor Reid was asked questions.
Well, yeah, she spoke, and I thought we'd go once around the table and that's it. But other council members can speak 2 or 3 times.
Well, Councillor Segura, if anyone directed a question to you, Councillor Reid is the chair of the committee, and it was her motion, and I guess there was a question directed.
There wasn't even questions asked to her, and she spoke.
Well, it was a question directed at her, actually. So, the motion on the floor.
Debates, that's fine.
Mr. Clerk, I'm going to ask Mr. Clerk to read back the 2 bylaws.
No, you don't have to read it. You don't have to read. Mayor, you made up your mind, so, you conduct the meeting the way you want to.
Well, then let me conduct the meeting the way I want.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I'm going to ask the clerk to read this out. Actually, it was the clerk.
Your mind is made up.
Actually, the clerk suggested it is.
Mind is made up, Mayor.
Mr. Sikora, please. The clerk handed me a note, said it is important for us to read out the names of the 2 bylaws, so perhaps you could ask me to restate option 2. And that was a request of the clerk, and he's a nice guy. I'm going to do what he asked me to do. Okay? Mr. Clerk, Mr. Gilbert, would you please do as you like here?
Well then, yes, it's important for us to read the titles of the bylaws that are being given readings, and because there's been some debate. So what I will suggest, as put forward by Councillor Reid and seconded by Councillor Robinson, is that Council received the letter dated July 11th from the BD Group, that Council received for consideration the options outlined in the report, and that Council endorse a reduction in the building height proposed by the applicant as per their letter from 24 to 19 stories to a maximum of approximately 195 feet, and request the registration of a restrictive covenant. 2, give second, third, fourth, and final readings to Coquitlam Zoning Text Amendment Bylaw 4209, and give second and third readings to Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4213. As per the suggestion of the chair, perhaps we could hold back 4 and give it separate readings in order to provide that separation that was indicated.
That's fine.
I see consensus on the separation of the 2. So on what has just been read by the clerk, all in favor? Opposed? That motion is opposed by Councillors Lynch and Sikora. The motion carries. Oh, Councillor Asmundson as well, and the motion carries.
And I would like to ask a point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Sikora.
The situation is this for me. We've had the public hearing. We're given some third reading. Then we're going to go for public consultation. Then it's going to be brought back to council. Is that not new information?
No, we're not having any public consultation on the application before us tonight that we've just passed the second and third reading.
Actually close the door then. Okay, thank you.
Yes, that is correct.
Thanks, Mayor.
No, we haven't closed the door. We give it second. Councillor Sikora. Councillor Sikora. Okay. Now, Mr. Clerk.
The last part of the motion is that Council direct staff to withhold the processing of applications for high-rise developments in Austin Heights until the neighborhood center plan policies and C5 zone are reviewed with respect to building heights in the context of the comments received at the public hearing, and return to Council for consideration and direction for further public consultation.
That's already on the floor. It was divided. The motion is still Councillor Reid, Councillor Robinson. I'll put the question. All in favor? Opposed? Everyone's agreed on that one. That one passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item, item 13, is the authorization for the issuance of a development permit amendment for Phase 2 of the proposed mixed commercial and residential development entitled Grand Central at 2962 Glen Drive. Staff recommendations that Council approve the signing and sealing of this development permit.
I'm going to ask for just a couple of minutes or 30-second break. I see some people leaving.
Sure.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Now, Councillor Robinson says you're just getting to the good stuff. It's true. These people are going to miss one of the most exciting road cancellations in council history. Thank you. You're good. Okay. I'm going to ask council's concurrence on what council intended, and I know what council intended, but the motion we just passed was to direct staff to withhold processing of applications for high-rise developments, and I'm going to ask council's concurrence and a vote on the word other applications for high-rise developments, because we clearly didn't mean this one. And so a motion is from Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Robinson. The motion as amended. Any further questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Worship. And make the minutes that much clearer.
Thank you. And
Item 13 pertains to the authorization for the issuance of a development permit amendment for Phase 2 of the proposed mixed commercial and residential development entitled Grand Central. This is located at 2962 Glen Drive. Staff recommendation is to approve the signing and sealing of this DP amendment and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
And the final item recommended forward from this afternoon is the proposed road cancellation application adjacent to 2150 Como Lake Avenue. This is bylaw 4233. Staff recommendation and, the Land Use and Economic Development Committee's recommendation is that Council give first, second, and third readings to Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4233 and direct that this bylaw be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the Charter.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. This is a small road at the top of Thermal. All in favor? Opposed? My goodness, a spellbinding conclusion and unanimous.
Your Worship, that is the last formal item on this agenda.
Motion by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Robinson to adjourn. Before we take the vote on that, I thank everybody for their participation tonight, and we'll take a short break for part of August, but a lot of us are still going to be working through that period, but land use apparently continues through that. Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. The motion is to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. That's right. Thank you very much. All the best.